Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive historical irony right at the heart of the Spanish Civil War. We usually just hear about this conflict as a warm-up for World War II, right? A tragic clash between the forces of democracy and fascism. But if we really look at how the Spanish Civil War actually started and the true sequence of events that led directly to a revolution, we uncover a story that's so much more complex. The scale of this upheaval literally changed history forever. So, here's the big question we're going to tackle. How does a military coup designed specifically to stop a revolution actually end up starting one? It's the ultimate case of unintended consequences. We're going to look really closely at how a deeply conservative quest for strict order accidentally sparked one of the most massive, radical proletarian uprisings in European history. To fully grasp the sheer irony of this, we first have to look at the deeply fractured fabric of Spanish society at the time. To unpack all of this, we'll break it down into 6 parts. The deep roots of the conflict, the failure of the democratic experiment, the July 1936 coup, arming the workers, the resulting social revolution, and finally, how ideology played out on the battlefield.
Okay, part 1. Deep roots of conflict. The two Spains.
You see, this war didn't just pop out of nowhere in a vacuum. Imagine a society split completely in half. On one side, you've got this deeply entrenched oligarchy, wealthy landowners, the top military brass, the Catholic Church holding all the traditional levers of power. And on the flip side, a totally impoverished working class. We're talking rural farmhands in the South practically starving, alongside factory workers packed into miserable living conditions in places like Catalonia. People ominously called it the two Spains, because the inequality gap was just that staggering. Moving on to part 2. The democratic experiment fails, the Second Republic. So, in 1931, the monarchy falls, and this new democratic republic steps in to try and fix centuries, literally centuries, of inequality. But man, the expectations were just enormous. They pushed for rapid reforms, secularization, land redistribution, and it instantly polarized the country. Looking at the timeline, you can see it all unravel. The right tries a military coup in 1932. When reforms stall out, frustrated left-wing workers launched massive strikes in 1934. By February 1936, a left-wing Popular Front coalition wins the elections, hollowing out the political center completely. The whole country was basically an unsustainable pressure cooker. Which brings us to part 3, the July 1936 coup, the spark. By the sweltering summer of 1936, that pressure cooker exploded. General Francisco Franco and his allies in the military decided to just bypass the ballot box entirely. They honestly believed they were the only ones who could save Spain from imminent communist ruin. So their goal was straightforward: launch a ruthless coup, decisively crush the democratic government, wipe out the labor unions, and force the country back into traditional authoritarian order. But here's where things go completely off script. The coup was designed for a lightning-fast takeover, but it fractured almost immediately. The military rebels easily grabbed Spanish Morocco and big chunks of the rural mainland. But in the heavily populated industrial cities, places like Madrid and Barcelona, the uprising was fiercely defeated by the people in the streets. This partial failure violently split the country right down the middle into 2 heavily armed zones. And just like that, the Spanish Civil War had officially begun. Now part 4, arming the workers. The state collapses. This right here is the true irony of the conflict. Think about it. When your own army rebels against you, the state's authority basically vanishes overnight. The Republican government initially hesitated, terrified of what would happen next. But with a gun literally to their heads, they became completely desperate. To survive the military assault, they were forced to open the armories and hand weapons directly to radical labor unions, groups like the anarchist CNT and the socialist UGT. In doing so, the government signed away its own monopoly on force. Power instantly transferred to the armed workers in the streets. In a matter of hours, everything flipped. The folks out there aren't formal professional soldiers. They're everyday union members, factory workers, and regular citizens. They built barricades out of cobblestones and physically defeated a military coup in their own neighborhoods. And now they held the guns. And with those guns came the absolute power to dictate the future of the nation on their own terms.
Part 5. The Social Revolution, a New Society.
So, remember how the military staged this coup to prevent a Marxist takeover? Well, by doing so, they accidentally handed the working class the exact tools they needed to ignite one. Spain split into two entirely different worlds. The Nationalists fought a self-described crusade to protect religious tradition and defend private property. But over in the Republican zones, the newly armed revolutionaries went all in. We're talking taking over factories and completely collectivizing entire industries. In some rural farming communities, they didn't just abolish capitalism, they literally abolished money. Just think about that for a second. It was a profound, mind-bending reorganization of daily life.
There's this quote from Marxist writer Victor Serge that perfectly captures the mood on the ground. He pointed out that these armed workers weren't just defending a bourgeois republic from a military coup anymore. They were seizing a once-in-a-lifetime chance to totally transform society. For the anarchists and radical socialists, defeating fascism and building a workers' utopia from the ashes were the exact same mission. They weren't fighting to go back to the old democracy. They were fighting for a radically egalitarian new world.
Finally, Part 6, Ideology on the Battlefield, a Global Fight.
This intense grassroots social revolution naturally grabbed the attention of the entire planet. And both sides absolutely weaponized propaganda to demonize each other. You can see the distinct visuals here. On the Republican side, posters mock the Nationalists, depicting them as a boat full of greedy elites and foreign puppet masters. Conversely, Nationalist propaganda painted the Republicans as a terrifying Grim Reaper, a looming communist menace, coming to bring absolute ruin to the sacred Spanish homeland. There was zero middle ground.
These deeply held beliefs resonated so powerfully that over 35,000 international volunteers from more than 50 countries left their homes to join the Republic's international brigades. These folks were driven by a sincere, passionate belief that they had to stop fascism or advance global socialism. At the same time, the conflict morphed into a massive international proxy war. Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy heavily armed the Nationalists, while the Soviet Union backed the Republic. Spain basically became a grim testing ground for the horrific weaponry and tactics that would soon engulf the entire globe. Ultimately, though, that grand social revolution didn't survive. In a dark twist of irony, it was aggressively dismantled by the Republican government itself, who were heavily pressured by the Soviet Union to crush the anarchists and focus entirely on strict military discipline. Still, even that wasn't enough to save the Republic. The Nationalists won a grueling, brutal war of attrition in 1939. It left roughly 500,000 people dead, sent hundreds of thousands into tragic exile, and perfectly foreshadowed the devastating global conflict of World War II. Which brings us right back to the sheer irony of it all, and a final lingering thought regarding the dangerous, unintended consequences of trying to enforce order through the barrel of a gun. If the military had never launched their coup to impose order, would the workers have ever gained the weapons to actually start their revolution? It's an incredible what-if to think about. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history behind the headlines.